Let's get right into it. Number 5. You're a genius at being wrong. Somewhere right now, a person with 3 degrees and a well-organized bookshelf is absolutely convinced of something that is factually, embarrassingly, incorrect. And here's the twist: the smarter they are, the more creative their justification for being wrong. This is called the intelligence trap, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Your brain doesn't just make mistakes, it builds a whole architectural firm around those mistakes and defends them with PowerPoint slides. Psychologists have found that high intelligence often correlates with better rationalization skills, not better accuracy, which means a smarter person isn't necessarily more right, they're just more convincing when they're wrong. They can argue circles around reality so fast that reality gives up and goes home. You've seen this person at a dinner table. You might be this person at a dinner table. The scientific term for this is dysrationalia, the condition where your IQ and your ability to think rationally operate in completely separate buildings and haven't met for lunch in years. You can have a high IQ and still make decisions that a golden retriever would raise an eyebrow at. Intelligence is a toolkit. Wisdom is knowing which tool to use. A lot of people are out here using a hammer on a screw and wondering why the shelf fell. Basically, being smart doesn't protect you from being wrong. It just makes your wrongness more articulate. Number 4. You have multiple intelligences and excel at ignoring most of them. For decades, schools handed out one type of intelligence test, produced one type of score, and sent you home with a number that was supposed to summarize your entire cognitive worth. Howard Gardner looked at this system, looked at the diversity of human capability, and essentially said, and this is a paraphrase, "That's adorable." His theory of multiple intelligences proposed that humans are intelligent in at least 8 different ways: linguistic, logical mathematical, musical, spatial, bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalist. That means the kid who fails every math test but can read a room better than a seasoned diplomat, or the one who can't write an essay but can rebuild an engine blindfolded, might be operating at a genius level in dimensions the system never thought to measure. Now, Gardner's theory has its critics. Some researchers argue the intelligences are really just talents or personality traits with a fancy label. Fair enough. But the core observation holds: human capability is embarrassingly multidimensional, and most institutions reward exactly one flavor of it. If your genius lives in rhythm, empathy, movement, or spatial reasoning, traditional metrics will cheerfully tell you you're average, while you're out there doing things other people literally cannot do. The point isn't that everyone is secretly a genius. The point is that the measuring tape has always been too short. Number 3. Emotional intelligence is actually intelligence. For a long time, the word emotional was treated like the opposite of smart. Emotions were the messy, irrational stuff you were supposed to override with logic. Be rational, not emotional. Don't let feelings cloud your judgment. Your feelings are the problem. Except, plot twist, your feelings are also the solution, and neuroscience has receipts. Antonio Damasio studied patients with damage to the brain's emotional processing centers, specifically the prefrontal cortex and amygdala regions. These patients had perfectly intact IQs, perfectly intact logical reasoning, and they were completely unable to make good decisions. Simple choices like what to eat for lunch became paralyzing. Without emotional input, the brain had no way to assign value to options. Logic alone, it turns out, cannot tell you what matters. Emotion is the system that does that. This is where emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, understand, and regulate your own emotions and read others, becomes genuinely critical. People high in EQ tend to have better relationships, better professional outcomes, better mental health, and better decision-making under pressure. Not because they cry more productively, but because they have accurate internal data that pure logic heads are flying blind without. The person who dismisses their emotions as weakness is essentially pulling out their own navigation system and insisting they don't need it because they have a very good map. Maps don't tell you when you're hungry, scared, or about to make a terrible life choice. Your emotions do. Number 2. You are bad at predicting your own happiness. If you got that promotion, bought that house, moved to that city, or finally got those curtains, you'd be happy. You're very sure about this. You've thought about it. You have a clear vision. Your future self, standing in that kitchen with those curtains, is thriving. You're wrong. Statistically, confidently, measurably wrong. Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert spent years studying what he calls affective, forecasting our ability to predict how future events will make us feel. The consistent finding: humans are terrible at it. We overestimate how good things will make us feel, and we overestimate how bad things will make us feel. We underestimate our own resilience after failure, and we underestimate how quickly we'll adapt to success and want something else. This adaptation mechanism is called hedonic adaptation. Your emotional baseline resets faster than you think. Lottery winners return to baseline happiness within about a year. So do people who experience serious injuries, in many documented cases. Your brain aggressively normalizes new circumstances because staying emotionally overwhelmed by anything, good or bad, would be energetically catastrophic. The result is a permanent gap between your imagined future and your actual experience of it. You spend enormous mental and physical resources chasing emotional states. Your brain is specifically designed to dissolve the moment you reach them. It's not tragic. It's just your nervous system running updates without asking permission. Number 1. You can be smart and have absolutely no common sense. There is a specific type of person who can solve differential equations in their head, but cannot figure out that the door says pull, not push. You've met this person. You may have been this person. Academia has quietly been producing them for centuries and releasing them into a world that requires you to, occasionally, interact with a grocery store. The disconnect between academic intelligence and practical reasoning is so well documented, it has its own cultural vocabulary. Book smart, not street smart, is the folk version. The psychological version involves the concept of tacit knowledge, the kind of understanding you can't get from reading, only from doing. Things like reading social cues, navigating ambiguous situations, knowing when to stop talking, understanding that I'm fine rarely means fine. Tacit knowledge is absorbed through experience, failure, and embarrassment, 3 things that don't show up on any standardized test. Robert Sternberg proposed a theory of successful intelligence that breaks down into 3 parts: analytical intelligence, the academic stuff, creative intelligence, generating new ideas, and practical intelligence, actually applying knowledge to real life. Most educational systems train the first one almost exclusively, and then act surprised when graduates struggle to function outside a structured environment. The brutal irony is that high analytical intelligence can actively interfere with practical reasoning. Overthinkers second-guess instincts that are usually correct. They build complex models for situations that needed a simple answer 20 minutes ago. Sometimes the smartest move is obvious, and being smart makes you suspicious of obvious things. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.